You can't analyze the state of play in our government without looking at the right. And the big question is whether or not Republicans will resist anything that resembles success for a Biden administration in the name of Trump. He has a prime speaking slot at CPAC, right, which is the conservative stronghold. You got Republicans going to kiss that ring or something else at Mar-a-Lago. How do they move on without him? Very few are calling to do that, by the way. One of them is our next guest, Congressman Adam Kinzinger, Republican, Illinois. Good to see you, sir.
You too, my man. How are you?
Let's discuss what you're just going to love, which is how hard a task you have. So first, we have a member of your leadership, Steve Scalise, who was on TV, asked a very simple question about the legitimacy of the election and said this. Nothing like silence. Am I supposed to do an impression of him? So Steve Scalise wouldn't answer the question about their
election was not stolen, correct?
Look, Joe Biden's the president. There were a few states that did not follow their state laws. That's really the dispute that you've seen continue on.
I asked you, is he the legitimate president of the United States, and do you concede that this election was not stolen? Very simple question. Please just answer
look,
it.
Once the electors are counted, yes, he's the legitimate president. But if you're going to ignore the fact that there were states that did not follow their own state legislatively set laws, that's the issue at heart.
Now, here's the problem. That's not true, what he said. And I think he knows it's not true. It's hard to know because he lives in such a silo. You know, he's such a right fringe kind of inhabitant. But there is no state that didn't follow its law in a way that was unacceptable to that state's lawmaking process or its adjudication process through the courts. It's just not true. But if your leadership is saying that, that's a problem for you because your party agrees. Would you support if Trump formed a third party? 46% of your brothers and sisters say yes. 27% say I'll stay GOP. 27% say I don't know. How do you beat all this?
It's going to take time, and it's going to take actually speaking up and saying the truth. And so, you know, with the whip's comments, I don't understand why we can't just say the very basic thing, which is Joe Biden's president. You know, you see this chatter where everybody talks about, well, then you're disenfranchising the 74 million people that voted for Donald Trump. Look, he had 74 million people vote for him. Joe Biden had like 81 million people. So you're not being disenfranchised. You're actually being enfranchised. It's just more people voted the other way. That's what this whole thing is about. And that's where I get concerned is if you have concerns with how an election was run, okay, even though the federal government's job, I mean, if you think about when the system was set up before the days of Twitter, we just simply receive what a state sends us and we say, okay, good to go. You know, that's our job. If there's a problem with how Pennsylvania runs its elections, that's for the people of Pennsylvania to deal with in the state legislature, not for us to come in and to implement our will. And so I don't understand why such a basic threshold. Look, we lost, okay? Donald Trump lost. And instead of complaining about that, we need to just figure out why and try to get more votes than the next person the next time.
But you also have to figure out why you're such a rare animal. You know, I was talking about you this weekend, one of my favorite pastimes. And somebody was like, oh, Kinzinger, he just hates Trump. I said, is that why you voted with him 90% of the time? I said, the guy's a conservative Republican. That's what he is. You may like that. You may not like that. This is about that and part of character, integrity, and what you want to see in a leader. You know, your voting record is no Republican could really blink at it and say you're not, you know, a real member of the party. But you got censured by your state party because you're not pure Trump enough. Your own family was chasing after you with 2 different letters about how, you know, all the things that if only family can say to one of their own about what a disappointment you are. Can you win in this party right now at home?
Yeah, I certainly hope so. I'm going to try. And that's where, look, there's been basically Donald Trump has had, you know, unmatched for 4 or 5 years, the megaphone. And now we need to have competing voices. I wish it was more than just me out there, but I'm going to continue to be as loud as I can. That's what the whole I have to do the shameless plug. Countryfirst.com is about with a one is because it's about not propelling me, not putting me in a position. It's about saying to truly country first Republicans or independents that are country first, or even some Democrats saying, look, stand up and put the country before any single person. And I think, look, there's nobody in my party, I think, that really believes this is a long-term winning solution, but they're hoping, I think in many cases, that somebody like me, or there is an organic movement away from Trump, and then they can say, gee, I was never with him the whole time. The problem is in this era of new media and everything, the tapes last.
True. And look, you do have the mandate issue on your side that, your party is folding itself over for Trump, who has never won a majority of any election he's been in. And that's an interesting bet that goes to the kind of changing demographics and where your party is on it. Does any of this give you pause? Not about being a Democrat, because you don't agree with them on most policy things, but of whether or not you're in the right business. You're a natural leader. Everyone who knows you says that. But do you think there is a space for you in the state of politics right now?
So I think that's what we're going to know in the next few years, honestly, is, where does this party go? What does that look like? Does it continue to say we're going to pledge allegiance to a man over a flag? In some cases, does it say, you know what, we're going to get back to the roots of what we believe and put it in 21st century with updated technology? If that's the case, and I think that will be the case, but it's only going to happen when people are coming out and speaking the truth. I mean, look, Chris, in my district, I got 65% of the vote. Donald Trump got 56% of the vote. If you think the Donald Trump thing in the long term is going to be the winning coalition and not somebody like me that's conservative, but doesn't offend people and doesn't go out and attack and say that you owe me everything and doesn't incite insurrections, then we'll be a minority party forever. But I don't know what that looks like. All I know is I can rest with real peace knowing that I'm going to fight as hard as I can to get a normal functioning Republican Party that needs to be part of this.
And in fairness, you didn't get brought into office because Trump said so. He was not a fan of yours for some time because of your lack of fealty. We haven't heard of the party making a move on you unless there's something you wanted to let us know in terms of not wanting you on committees or anything like that. So that's a good indication. Have you been able to mollify any of your family members?
So look, the vast majority of my family, even if they disagree with me, they're good family members. These are my dad's cousins. And quite honestly, the letter that came out, I didn't even release that. She had sent that to so many people out of so much anger, just can't help herself. And it went out. And I'm glad the letter came out because I think that people need to see, if you haven't experienced that division in your family, this is the best example of it. And so look, I hold nothing against them. I mean, maybe someday I'll have to look back and do some more forgiveness in my heart, but I don't feel it right now. I just have no desire really to reach out and repair it. That's up to them.
Boy, you put a vowel on the end of your name, and you'd know exactly how mad you are at them right now. Maybe this is an upside to not having more of an ethnic swing to you. Congressman Kinzinger, look, I do not mean to give you a hard time about your challenge. I think that it is really refreshing to have somebody who just wants to do what they think is right policy-wise and personally in terms of the values. It's just not a very helpful climate for you. That's why I consider it a pleasure to have you on the show to make the case.
You bet. Anytime.
All right. Be well. It's true. I know you guys are going to come at me and say, hey, we need more guys like him. Maybe, maybe not, depending on your politics. But it is refreshing. And now we're seeing the opposite. Trump is going back to CPAC. That organization, back in the day, would have really had no part of someone like him. But things have changed. Why is he a good bet for them? Again, he lost re-election by more than 7 million votes. The most votes we've ever seen someone get was his opponent. He lost the House, lost the Senate. Why is he the one that conservatives turn to for inspiration? That is a question for the man behind CPAC on the choice to keep the MAGA movement going. Matt Schlapp, next. Trump's going to make his first presidential appearance this weekend at the Conservative Political Action Conference in Orlando, CPAC. The same time, his former VP Mike Pence declined a chance to speak, supposedly because The former president and VP are supposed to stay quiet after the inauguration. That's why he says he's not going. Let's talk about who is going. Let's bring in the chairman of CPAC, Matt Schlapp. Good to see you, Matt. Why is this the right move for CPAC to give Trump the platform which somewhat presents him as a future prospect?
Well, I mean, the reason why it's right for President Trump to be at CPAC is because he just spent 4 years enacting the most conservative policy we've ever seen from any president, certainly any Republican president. And 73 million Americans voted for him. They thought the policies helped make America strong. We weren't apologizing overseas. The forgotten men and women had great economic prospects. And, you know, he simply did what he said he was going to do. So why not have him speak? It seems to me that it makes perfect sense that he would come back and talk to his followers and faithful and talk about what's going to happen in the future.
Because it makes CPAC tacitly endorsing his election farce.
Well, I don't know what that means.
Well, he lied about the election being a fraud, and you having him there and giving him a platform seems to be your acknowledgement of the same. If you have him on the platform, then you're saying,
so
yeah,
we're
we like
going
what he
to
says.
spend. I'd love you to look at our agenda. We're actually going to spend a lot of time going through what happened in these states. You said several things in the previous interview that simply aren't true. You said that these states were simply following state law. I was in the state of Nevada. That's simply not true.
No, I didn't.
Clark County,
I didn't say that.
Clark County was not following state law.
I didn't say that. What I said was...
What do you mean?
I'll tell you. What I said was, it is not true that any state decided that it was doing something wrong. And states get to decide. And it was adjudicated. You just don't like that you lost in the state. You don't like that the Supreme Court refused to see any merit to your claims. You don't like that when you say people voted in places where they didn't live, the numbers were lower than you suggested and were found unimpressive to the court. You don't like those things, but those things are true.
I don't like those things, but it's still very important that we go back to the idea of legal voting, and people should be legally registered to vote in order to vote. That people, I don't think it's very controversial to say that people should vote one time. And when you're in the midst of a pandemic,
but you don't have a significant number of people who voted more than once.
You shouldn't be able to vote in 2 states.
It's not conceptual.
That's not true.
It's not conceptual, though, Matt. I hear what you're saying. I've heard you say it a lot.
Just because you win,
I'm just saying it's just not true.
Well, you had me on the show, and you're telling me that saying that there was widespread illegal voting is false. And I'm trying to explain to you that, for instance, what they did in the state of Georgia, when they had an illegal consent decree to mind you, not verify the signatures of mail-in ballots, which is what they also did in Clark County, essentially. That means that you have no security on the ballot that was mailed out without unsolicited vast mail-in ballots. They were returned with no security. You can't have an election in another country that the State Department would accept these types of ground rules. So we got to go back to voting in a legal and orderly manner.
But Matt, you're making a straw man argument. It's a boogeyman argument. There is no proof of rampant fraud. Nobody's saying the process is perfect. You lost. And now you're going to keep that going. Steve Scalise the other day on TV, you guys really want the conservative movement to be made on the back of a lie about the election?
Let me just go through a couple things you just said.
Sure.
Joe Biden is my president, okay? He won the election.
Good.
That doesn't mean that there wasn't voter fraud and voter irregularity in the last election. You know, there's a Republican who went to jail for voter fraud in North Carolina.
Right.
It can't just be Republicans that commit voter fraud. When voter fraud occurs, no matter who
but you need to have proof,
it should be fully prosecuted. And
you have to have proof that it would have changed an outcome.
We have it.
You don't
have it, but you're right. You're right. We do have it.
You can't have it because you had chances to produce it. You had chances to produce it. Matt,
would you sit down?
No, because you had your chance at this.
You won't do it.
Matt, you had your chance. Matt, why do you ignore that dozens of lawsuits failed on this? Why ignore it?
You're right. They did fail, but guess what? You know this. You're a good lawyer. Just because you fail in court doesn't mean you don't have a good case. It means you lost in court. And the fact remains that you can say it wasn't enough voter fraud. I don't think any voter fraud is acceptable. I actually think we should try to get rid of all of it. You should never be able to vote through the mail in this country without somebody on the other side making sure it was you and making sure that you're a legally registered voter.
Georgia state officials.
You must agree with that.
Chris,
do you agree with what I just said?
I
You must
agree
with that.
I agree with the premise. I don't agree with the proposition of what happened. There is no proof that there was a problem based on your suspicion. Georgia said there was no
fraud. I'll sit down and show you the proof. Would you
Georgia
sit down with
says
me
there was no
and go
fraud,
through the proof?
And these are your people.
That's not right.
They are Republicans.
That's not right. No,
it is right.
No,
they
you're
said
not right. No,
I am right.
Nobody ever said there was no. Nobody ever said there was no fraud in Georgia. What they actually
the Georgia
said was
officials said
that
exactly
they were going to not check the signatures on the mailed-in ballots. And if you don't
heard
check the
Georgia
signatures
state
on the
officials.
mailed-in ballots, you
You
can't
heard
know
Georgia's-
if that's a legal ballot.
Matt,
and you
come on.
can't run a democracy that way.
Matt, listen. If you want to make things better, make them better. I'm just telling you, these arguments are making things worse.
I do that every day, my friend.
These are your
I do that every day, and I
officials
think
in Georgia from your party who said there was no fraud here. Stop saying it. You're going to get us hurt. And then you did.
Chris, there was widespread voter fraud in the last election. In a bipartisan sense, Democrats and Republicans should agree on a couple things. You should be a registered voter to vote. Certainly, if you're in a registration state, you should only vote once. And if you vote by mail, somebody at that election office should have to verify that signature according to the state statute. That did not happen in the state of Nevada, and that did not happen in Georgia, and that did not happen in Philadelphia.
And if you are going to
you can say it's
qualify-
fine. I say let's never have an election like that ever again.
And if you're going to look, nobody should argue against improvements. What I'm saying is very simple, and you know this. What Trump
Very
did,
good.
What Trump did was, well, first of all, these same issues came up 4 years ago. You guys had a deaf ear. You said the Democrats were sore losers, and they didn't respect the process, and they were undermining democracy. So let's not get on our soapbox too fast.
You spent 4 years saying there was Russian collusion and that was not, that the election should be questioned, and Hillary Clinton said to Joe Biden he should never ever concede. And this is like hypocrisy.
Hold on.
Never
No,
seen.
it's not. Here's why. Not only did I say there was collusion, I will say it now that there was collusion. Collusion is not a crime. It's a behavior. And Trump's people did what they do best. They did dumb things for bad reasons. But look, you made your arguments. I gave you your time. We'll look and see what happens at CPAC.
Bob Mueller
You're
found no collusion, my friend.
He did not find no collusion. Collusion is not a crime. He wasn't even looking at it as such. Learn to read, my brother. It's right in the details. I got to go.
There was nothing inappropriate with Russia in the 2016 election.
He never said that.
Good to see you, my friend.
Never said it. Good to see you.
He did.
I'm glad to offer the platform. Let the people decide. Matt Schlapp, CPAC. Let's see what Trump says when he goes there. And look, he's going to have trouble. Not with CPAC. They have nobody better. They have nobody that they believe in more. That's on them. He has trouble that has nothing to do with them. Legal peril. The Supreme Court rejected his bid to keep his taxes from a New York prosecutor. That doesn't mean that we're all going to get to peruse the former president's taxes. Know that. But his niece says she has a case against him, and she knows him. And she knows why, or she believes why, he is so worried about this, and that it's something we have to take note of. And she also has a guess as to what happens next. Let's discuss. The Supreme Court decided today to allow former President Trump's tax returns into the hands of a New York prosecutor. Now, that may place Trump and his businesses a step closer to legal jeopardy, because a big part of the theory is that they're looking to see if he played games with assets versus liabilities, meaning it meant one thing when he was trying to borrow money against it and another thing when he had to pay taxes on it. So that can be a dangerous game. Trump, after all, has gone to extraordinary lengths to keep his financial records hidden. This is a grand jury investigation, okay? They will soon have access to documents spanning from January 2011 to August 2019, including tax returns that come from his accounting firm. They relate to the Trump Organization's employment of his former lawyer, Michael Cohen, and those hush money payments that Cohen allegedly made to two women on behalf of Trump. It's really not an allegation. He made the payments. Meantime, Trump faces nearly a dozen investigations and lawsuits across several states, including one from his own niece, Mary Trump, who has since been revealed as the source for the New York Times expose on Trump's taxes. She's also the author, of course, of Too Much and Never Enough. Mary Trump, welcome back to Primetime.
Great to be here. Thanks, Chris.
Why doesn't he want people, let alone prosecutors, to see his taxes?
Well, there are a couple of reasons. It's hard to know which is more important to him, but probably the most important one is that he's never actually made any money. And every penny Donald has was really my grandfather's initially. Secondly, he's going to be shown to have been somebody who gave zero to charitable causes. And for our purposes, the most important one, of course, is that he has most likely been committing tax fraud for decades. So it's a huge victory, I think, for the Supreme Court to have cleared the way for New York State to get access to Donald's tax returns, because it's a long time coming. He should have, faced accountability a long time ago. And as we learned from your previous guest, the Republican Party is going to do absolutely nothing to contain Donald, and they're just going to allow him to continue to be the head of their increasingly anti-democratic party that's perfectly comfortable engaging in counter-majoritarian tactics to stay in power illegitimately.
Well, look, politically, his party has a problem with perception versus reality. In politics, perception can be reality, and that's what they're hoping when it comes to the election fraud. All I can do is present the facts. And to be honest with you, that's an easy conversation. I'm sure everybody will look at it through a partisan lens, but there are no good arguments there. They're easy to bat down. I could do that and my taxes at the same time. But this is different now. When the taxes come out, the perception of a prosecutor can be reality if there's proof. The counter, Mary, is, but he says he gets audited all the time. Wouldn't they have caught him already if he had done bad things with his taxes?
Well, first of all, there's no reason to believe that he actually has been under audit for the last, what has he been saying that for, a decade?
Forever, yeah. He says, I'm always under audit because I'm a strong Christian,
Yeah.
he said.
Sure. But that aside, it doesn't matter what he says, because the IRS knows the truth. And pretty soon, the New York, Cy Vance and Letitia James in New York are going to have access to those documents that show what is the case. And as we've known since 2018, thanks to that extraordinary New York Times article by Suzanne Craig and Russ Buettner, Donald has been playing fast and loose with the truth regarding his finances for decades. And it's about time the American people have access to exactly what has been going on and what most likely has continued going on, because let's face it, this is a very long-standing pattern. Does
your lawsuit stand where in terms of its process?
We're still at the pretty beginning stages of it. We have a hurdle of statutes of limitations to get over. So once hopefully that gets cleared, it will be full speed ahead. But the good thing is, it's not just my lawsuit. It's not just Cy Vance, not just Letitia James. My lawyer, Robert Kaplan, has two other lawsuits going on. We have potentially an investigation in Georgia looking into voter fraud. And I know that doesn't have to do with the finances, but what we've learned is that Donald has a tendency to get away with things. So the more we pile on, the more avenues of investigation there are, the more likely it is that we're finally maybe going to get some justice.
What is your sense of how your uncle deals with having so many irons in the fire against him?
He probably doesn't think about it very much, honestly. I think at the moment, he's probably focused on CPAC. He's probably looking at that as his way to get back into the conversation. And let's be clear, CPAC, his speech at CPAC is going to be an endless list of grievances about how the election was stolen from him, how the election was stolen from his voters. And regardless of what other Republicans may or may not say, they're going to be enabling that extraordinarily dangerous rhetoric. So, it's unfortunate that that's being allowed to happen, but it also increases the urgency of these state level cases and these lawsuits going through.
I mean, look, he's the best game in town for CPAC, and he's never made the kind of money from anything as quickly as he has from his complaints about the election. They've raised $250 million in 8 weeks based on election lies. So this is profitable for him as well. And it leads to the legacy effect. You're the branch of the family that doesn't like him. But there is this idea of he will be able to appoint who comes next, even if that means it's one of his daughters-in-law. Lara Trump is trying to extend the brand. Here's what she says.
He has told us to stay tuned, that this is not over for him, and he has indicated that he probably would be interested in running again in 2024. Look, he is the head of the Republican Party. He is really the person that everyone will continue to turn to in order to help them get across the line, whether we're talking about 2022 or beyond, I think.
So she wants to get in the game. You had said that you didn't think he'd want to run again. And look, he has to say he might because it makes him marketable. But where do you think the truth lies?
Well, it's not that he wouldn't run again. It's that he has no intention of actually going all the way because he won't risk losing. But he will pretend to run for sure because, as you said, it's incredibly lucrative for him. And the truth of the matter, though, is that if indeed he continues to be the head of the Republican Party, what we need to do is what you alluded to in the last segment. We need to make it clear that what the Republican Party stands for is the big lie. And let's not forget, even more importantly, they seem to be perfectly comfortable with the fact that this man incited an armed insurrection against our country, and the Republicans have no problem with that. That needs to be a permanent stain on any Republican's reputation that continues to enable this extraordinarily dangerous rhetoric.